Coming to you from a humble newsroom on the back lot of yesteryear. Yesterday's news today. Recorded with the highest fidelity instruments that were on sale on Amazon. You will hear the most fascinating and terrific stories of our time. It's hard to know what to believe in this ever-changing world, but you can be certain to receive just the facts from our trusted newsman. Here he is, Jonathan T. McMalley.
Hello, and welcome to yesterday's news today. Before we proceed, a brief word from Bruce, our entertainment reporter.
On Friday, actor Chadwick Boseman passed away. The 43-year-old actor was perhaps most well known for his role as the superhero Black Panther, but also starred in Marshall, Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods, and 42 as Jackie Robinson, the first African-American to play in modern Major League Baseball. While still working on these projects these past 4 years, he was privately fighting colon cancer. Our hearts go out to his friends and family for their loss, but also to his fans who looked up to him. Many of his performances had been a source of inspiration, especially for youngsters who finally had a hero that looked like them. The loss of this talented man will be felt by many.
Thank you, Bruce. We begin today's show with the fires raging through California. Record high temperatures this spring created prime conditions for a dangerous fire season in the region. Starting on August 16th, thousands of lightning strikes ignited an inferno that has engulfed over 500,000 acres, destroyed countless properties, and forced tens of thousands of people to evacuate. California was already facing the highest number of coronavirus cases in the country, and displaced residents fear that packed evacuation centers make the risk of infection even worse. On top of this, the state is in the middle of a brutal heat wave and rolling blackouts. Resources within the state have been quickly depleted, as the number of fire crews, engines, and helicopters are simply not enough for the ever-increasing blazes. Due to COVID-19, their usual first line of defense against such disasters has been greatly reduced as well. For decades, incarcerated crews have been the first on the scene, but a coronavirus outbreak in a Northern California prison has reduced the 77 inmate fire crews down to 30. Among their duties is to be on the ground cutting fire breaks around evacuated homes. They are paid between $2 and $5 a day, and make an additional $1 per hour when working with active fires. CAL FIRE has been requesting aid from other agencies, such as the National Guard and out-of-state resources. The spokesperson has stated that they must fight these fires aggressively if they hope to keep them from spreading further. Many other states in the western U.S. are dealing with similar infernos, including Colorado, Montana, and Oregon. There's a different sort of fire burning in the streets of Kenosha, Wisconsin, after the shooting of 29-year-old Jacob S. Blake. While he reportedly attempted to break up an altercation between two women, police were called to the scene. A witness filmed the following events as Blake walked around his vehicle, followed by officers with their guns drawn. When Blake attempted to enter his vehicle, one of the officers grabbed his shirt and fired 7 times into the man's back. Blake's attorney, Benjamin Crump, said that he was attempting to check on his 3 sons inside the vehicle. They witnessed the shooting. It has been confirmed that Blake was in possession of a knife, but witnesses did not see him engaging in violent action. Jacob S. Blake was left paralyzed from the waist down. It is unknown if these injuries will be permanent. The police involved have been put on administrative leave. In the wake of this violence, citizens have taken to the streets, taking up the Black Lives Matter protests seen across the nation since the choking death of George Floyd. At several points, protests in Kenosha have escalated. Fights broke out. Bottles and fireworks were thrown at police, and tear gas was fired at protesters. Properties within the city have been damaged and burned. As a result, armed civilians have been seen outside businesses, saying they are preventing looting and destruction. Police officers have been recorded voicing their appreciation for these groups. Late Tuesday night, multiple individuals were shot, 2 fatally, by a white man opening fire on protesters while fleeing with a semi-automatic rifle. Still armed, he was able to leave the scene, walking directly past police. The suspect was arrested and is in custody in Illinois. The 17-year-old had often taken to social media to share posts espousing Blue Lives Matter. Since his being charged with multiple offenses including first-degree intentional homicide, many conservatives on social media and pundits, including Fox News' Tucker Carlson, many claiming he was acting in self-defense and defense of others' property. Additionally, a site that proclaims itself the #1 place for Christian crowdfunding has raised over $150,000 for the shooter's legal defense. These events were fresh in the minds of the thousands who marched on Washington, D.C. on Saturday. They gathered at the Lincoln Memorial on the 57th anniversary of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, calling for racial justice and to encourage voting participation. Many were also critical of the current administration. Speakers included Martin Luther King III, Reverend Al Sharpton, Jacob S. Blake's sister Latetra Woodman, Breonna Taylor's mother Tamika Palmer, and George Floyd's sister Bridget Floyd. Ms. Floyd expressed sorrow that her brother could not be there to share his voice, saying that, quote, "We have to be the voice, we have to be the change," end quote. Other parts of the nation are reeling in the wake of massive storms. On August 10th, Iowa was struck by a massive derecho, which is most simply described as a land hurricane. The storm lasted 14 hours, covering an area of nearly 800 miles with winds over 100 miles per hour. It damaged and destroyed thousands of homes, schools, and businesses. There's also concern as to the future yields of corn and soybean crops, with $3.77 billion of agricultural losses estimated. As we speak, Louisiana residents are recovering from the damaging winds of Hurricane Laura. While the storm made landfall on the Texas state line on Thursday as a Category 4 hurricane, it was later downgraded to a tropical storm. Unfortunately, the 150-mile-per-hour winds caused massive destruction, tearing roofs from buildings, collapsing power lines, and affecting some local water service. Additionally, 6 people were killed, and 843,000 lost power Thursday evening. While Laura dies down as it heads north, there are already concerns about more storms building in the Atlantic Ocean. The National Hurricane Center has identified 2 areas of potential tropical development. Peak hurricane season has just begun and usually lasts through early October. We will have more information as these storms develop. You may also look to the description related to this broadcast for opportunities to help those affected by the aforementioned cataclysmic events. Now we reach a segment of updates to past stories that have continued to develop. We begin with news out of Belarus, as hundreds of Belarusian state TV employees went on strike to join in on the massive protests. As promised by contested President Lukashenko, Russia came in to provide crews for at least one state channel, Belarus 3. It is also being reported that any journalists who have spoken out against Lukashenko have been blacklisted from continued work. Back in the States, Congress has passed a $25 billion postal service bill with bipartisan support, citing an emergency situation. Not only will this bill provide extra funding, but it also includes language to prevent harmful changes to the institution, including halting hiring freezes and any closure or consolidation of any post office. The bill, being separate from the second coronavirus stimulus bill, is expected to be dead on arrival once the Senate goes back in session on September 8th. We also have further news from the Republican National Convention. You may have heard a bit about the events lineup in our update broadcast this past Thursday, but there is yet more to cover. The first ever live broadcast of the RNC via the information superhighway focused on the president's achievements in regards to the economy and immigration. Many painted the president as a sole defender of American values against the lawless left. Speakers included individuals who spoke as victims of left-wing extremism, and conservative politicians and pundits who defended the president against criticisms including sexism and racism. Two surprise moments came from pre-recorded packages where President Trump presided over a naturalization ceremony and declared a presidential pardon. These segments drew accusations that he had violated the Hatch Act, which bans the use of federal government buildings for campaign events. The convention culminated in the president accepting the nomination of the Grand Old Party in front of a live audience on the White House South Lawn, and a fireworks display over the National Mall. Finally, a bite-sized update on our ByteDance story. The company continues to face criticism as TikTok is reported to have used a so-called backdoor to work around Google policy. It is alleged that they were collecting unique addresses of Android devices, allowing the application to track specific users and their online habits. Such a violation of privacy has been contested by the company, who insist that they collect less data than Facebook and Google. Which brings us to technology news. Facebook is nearing a settlement of a lawsuit that claims they illegally collected and stored millions of users' biometric data without permission. Illinois users accused the site of violating the state's Biometric Privacy Act with their feature that suggested which friends may be indicated within shared photographs. In July, the social media company had raised its settlement to $650 million. On Wednesday, a revised agreement won preliminary approval from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. Google is facing similar inquiries into how it handles user data and privacy. Among these, the Arizona Attorney General's office sued Google in May, accusing the company of deceiving users about how and when their location was being monitored. A recent version of the suit made on Friday included multiple Google employees and engineers confirming such concerns, saying that their privacy settings and design choices make it intentionally difficult for users to opt out of various forms of tracking. A group of state attorneys general and the U.S. Justice Department have further ongoing investigations into Google's practices that could result in additional lawsuits. And in the European Union, the company has faced multiple multi-billion-dollar fines and an antitrust investigation. Meanwhile, a bill in the Senate is requesting a backdoor for law enforcement to access user data on electronic platforms. Senators Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, and Marsha Blackburn introduced the Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act to bolster national security interests. The bill would force technology companies, communications providers, and device manufacturers to assist law enforcement and honor court orders for user information. They say it would prevent terrorists and criminals from, quote, being unable to hide behind technology, end quote. Critics of the bill fear this would not only be an invasion of privacy for U.S. citizens, but also that its implementation would lead to massive security issues. Online services would be forced to develop a mechanism to access users' encrypted data when issued a warrant. Such a system would be especially vulnerable to abuse and incursion, leaving individuals' information at greater risk of attacks and leaks. This leads us to a discovery by the security team Comparatech. They revealed that an unsecured database left nearly 235 million Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube user profiles exposed to a massive data leak. Records included varying information, including name, age, gender, phone numbers, emails, photos, and audience information. The massive amount of information will most likely be used to distribute spam and for phishing. The latter is a fraudulent practice where electronic mail is sent to individuals in an attempt to get them to reveal more personal information, including passwords and financials. Davey Winder, technology reporter for Forbes, urges companies to audit their access permissions, so further user data is not available for anyone who might come looking for it. Well, we still have an incredible amount of news to get to today, but now for a word from our sponsors.
With all the ne'er-do-wells that traffic the information superhighway, the web can be a rather spooky world. But more and more it is a part of our everyday lives. What would life be without the ability to share short documentaries of an unverifiable scientific nature, or relatable images with which you can inundate your family, friends, and coworkers? Well, if you are one of the countless people who enjoy filling every inane moment with the rub of a thumb on a glass screen, you need to learn to protect yourself. What you need is a VPN. That's a virtual private network. At any point in your browsing, you are sending out information about yourself whether you realize it or not. And that information can be accessed by advertisers, your service provider, and various villains with the technological know-how. A VPN rather puts a little tunnel around your location and identity, as well as further encrypting your information. It doesn't make it impossible for the bad guys, but it is a good start to making your browsing safer, and the internet a far less foreboding world. Before you ask, Jonathan, we don't have an actual VPN sponsoring us this week, so we are really just giving a general public service announcement about their usefulness.
At this point, Denberg, no part of me thought that advertisement was real.
That is quite disheartening, Jonathan, but nonetheless I shall carry on.
As will the news. Next, we will cover some local stories. First, a recording out of Harbin, Heilongjiang shows that cats don't always land on their feet. Local man Gao was out for a stroll with his golden retriever when a black and white cat fell from the heavens and struck him in the back of the head. With the man knocked unconscious, man's best friend entered a standoff with the flying feline, seemingly for injuring his owner. Gao spent 23 days in the hospital and is now undergoing physical therapy. He is seeking compensation from the cat's owner, from whose balcony it had fallen. Next, police on the Isle of Wight, off the coast of England, faced a different kind of animal attack. The officers were responding to a call about the discovery of an unexploded mortar shell, dating back to World War II. While addressing this, a couple of goats climbed atop their car, causing damage to the police vehicle. They shared a humorous appeal for any information about the kids who attacked their property. The information superhighway responded with infinite puns. The Royal Navy Explosives team also managed to remove the initial danger by detonating the mortar. Finally, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a much smaller form of destruction has many in the city mourning. At the intersection of 57th Street and Minnesota Avenue, a cornstalk had grown through the cracks in the concrete. It became an extremely popular sight around town, even gaining its own account on social media. The city's mayor, Paul Tenhaken, said it was amazing to see the community rally around the 57th Street corn as a sign of hope. The plant was a symbol of resiliency and hope as the pandemic rages on. Unfortunately, last Wednesday, an unknown individual ripped the lone stalk from the ground, and all that remains in its place is a sign saying, "Corn, R.I.P." Meanwhile, people across America are trying to find ways to cope with the fallout from the ever-going pandemic. In Vallejo, California, a single mother was evicted from her home in mid-July, even while an eviction moratorium was in place. Local advocates and lawyers warn that there are many exceptions to this rule, and many are still being evicted. Rosanna Sastrami fit into one of these gaps and soon found herself living out of her car with her twin 6-month-old children. She said, "I couldn't find a job. I couldn't secure childcare. I couldn't secure nothing." Her frustrations are held by many Americans as COVID-19 holds its grip on the nation. After dropping slightly at the beginning of the month, new weekly unemployment claims still hover around 1 million. With continuous claims holding above 14 million. This staggering number of jobless citizens now face further stressors as eviction moratoriums begin to run out. According to a recent review by researchers at the Aspen Institute Financial Security Program, the COVID-19 Eviction Defense Project, and the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, 30 million Americans are at risk of being evicted in the coming months because they cannot afford rent. While the wave of evictions has not yet fully begun, it is more likely to build over time, The federal moratorium expired on July 24th, and most landlords are required to give 30 days' notice to tenants before eviction. That means the beginnings of what has been called a homelessness pandemic could be on the horizon. Despite the ominous prognosis, there is some hope. The Federal Housing Finance Agency announced on Thursday that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would extend their moratoriums on single-family foreclosures and some evictions through December 31st. Also, there are reports of some landlords working with renters in hopes of assistance eventually coming from the government. As to this end, there are still proposals being worked through in Congress, but a solution to these and many other programs in the wake of coronavirus have not yet been agreed upon. This agreement may still be a ways away as Congress remains in recess. The Senate, which last took votes early this month, is likely to remain shut down until September 8th. The House, rather, did reconvene last weekend to pass legislation on the Postal Service. An exception has been made if it appears that a coronavirus plan can be passed in the meantime. According to Gallup polls, Americans' approval of the job Congress is doing has sunk to 18%. Carrying on to world news, Alexei Navalny, an outspoken opponent of Vladimir Putin, has been poisoned. The Russian politician and anti-corruption activist had fallen ill during a flight to Moscow on August 20th. By the time he was flown to Berlin that Saturday morning, the hospital confirmed that he had ingested a substance from the group of cholinesterase inhibitors. These are often found in pesticides and nerve agents and can be toxic to the brain. Navalny had grown quite popular over the years, especially with Russia's youth. He used the World Wide Web to share his investigations into Russia's ruling elite, and was also known for organizing protests. Previously, he had been arrested over a dozen times, attacked with a chemical permanently damaging his eye, and had his family's bank accounts frozen. This recent attack is suspected to have come from some tea he had prior to boarding his flight. Navalny remains in a medically induced coma, and doctors believe he will have lasting damage to his nervous system. Simultaneously, a U.S. Senate panel released an extensive report about Russian interference in the 2016 election. The Senate Intelligence Committee's report of nearly 1,000 pages detailed a network of contacts between Trump campaign advisors and Kremlin officials. It goes on to state that the Russian government indeed disrupted a U.S. election in favor of then-candidate Donald J. Trump, and that his campaign personnel, quote, presented attractive targets for foreign influence, creating notable counterintelligence vulnerabilities, end quote. It says that was due to the number of businessmen involved with the campaign who had little government experience and were eager for assistance from a foreign power. While the report was carried out in a bipartisan fashion, Republicans and Democrats differ on their conclusions. Democrats believe these new insights vividly paint a picture of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, leading to further national security threats. In contrast, the president called the report a hoax. Then, White House spokesman Judd Deere said it confirms that there was absolutely no collusion, calling it a, quote, baseless conspiracy theory peddled by radical liberals and their partners in the media, end quote. In further events that sound like they could very well be from the very beginning of Mr. Trump's presidency, a case involving Stormy Daniels is back in the news. A California Supreme Court judge has ordered President Trump pay $44,100 to the adult film actress for legal fees following her attempts to be released from a non-disclosure agreement with former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. The $130,000 agreement was regarding an affair that Daniels claimed she had with the president. He denies the affair occurred. The initial suit was dismissed as the NDA was deemed unenforceable. Mr. Trump's lawyers had argued that the president was not liable for fees because he did not sign the agreement. The court decided that since President Trump reimbursed Cohen for the $130,000, he was responsible for the cost of the legal fees. Continuing the news of yesteryear, U.S. District Judge Victor Marrero rejected an attempt to block a subpoena for 8 years of the former businessman's tax returns. This is part of an investigation by Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance. that started with payments the Trump Organization made to two women who alleged having affairs with the president, which he denied. Recent filings have shown the inquiry has expanded to payments including alleged insurance and bank fraud. Within a few hours of Marrero's decision, Mr. Trump's lawyers filed an appeal, asking for a freeze on the case. A hearing on the matter is slated to take place after September 1st. This is all following a decision last month where the Supreme Court ruled that the president is not immune from a grand jury's subpoena while in office. Mr. Trump has said he expects the case to reach the Supreme Court again before all is said and done. Another name from the annals of this administration, Steve Bannon, was arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit both wire fraud and money laundering through the We Build the Wall fundraising campaign. The initial goal of this campaign was to gather private funds in the event that construction of a border wall between Mexico and the USA was complicated by political and legal barriers. The initiative then shifted to a fundraiser to assist in building privately funded sections of the wall, which have been marred by structural and environmental issues. In the lawsuit, it is alleged that Bannon, along with Brian Colfage, Andrew Badolato, and Timothy Shea, had, quote, collectively received hundreds of thousands of dollars in donor funds from We Build the Wall, which they each used in a manner inconsistent with the organization's public representations, end quote. Bannon was said to have laundered over $1 million through another one of his nonprofit organizations under his control. After being arrested on a private yacht, Steve Bannon pled not guilty to the charges. This continues a trend of the president's former campaign staff who have been charged with crimes, including Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn. And our final story in national news returns to Facebook, who recently cracked down on pages, groups, and advertisements related to the conspiracy theory group QAnon. They have also stated that they will now downrank posts related to this and other groups in users' feeds and search results. Facebook said its goal was to limit the reach of violent rhetoric, political militias, and protest groups. This last classification included Antifa, an anti-fascist ideology without any formal organization. Because of this lack of a unified institution, groups involved in organizing the ongoing Black Lives Matter protests found their posts limited or removed. Both QAnon and anti-fascist voices have stated that this is an attack on their freedom of speech. QAnon had previously received massive bans on the platform Twitter, which they circumvented by co-opting the trend #Save the Children. This had been a fundraising effort for the humanitarian organization of the same name. Some anecdotal accounts say QAnon's overtaking of the topic to focus on their beliefs about pedophile rings with liberal politicians and celebrities was successful in bringing individuals into
No.
Bruce.
No, sir.
Bruce, I do not think it's time for your segment on Britney Spears quite yet.
That is a complex situation that we do not have all the details on. Seeing her very secluded life is indeed unsettling, and by all appearances, her father may be taking advantage of the conservatorship. My base reaction is that a grown woman should be able to have control over her own life.
Very well.
Now, let us return to the conspiracy theories.
I had that coverage very much in hand.
Did you, though, Jonathan? Because it sounded to me as though you were covering it just like any other story.
I was stating the information as it happened, Bruce. The way the news is meant to be reported.
I fear that you are not giving it the gravitas that it requires.
It is called objectivity, something that you seem to forget in your ever longer rants about entertainment.
Perhaps objectivity is the problem.
You cannot be serious. Denberg, can you intervene here?
I can, but I shan't, Jonathan. So far, this is riveting. I'm on the edge of my proverbial seat. What is going to happen next? Let's find out.
As I was saying, the media's coverage, or lack thereof, has allowed QAnon to become what it is today. They've been treated as though they were some mere collection of weirdos playing detective on the World Wide Web. And in that time, they have grown. Did you know that 20 of the congressional candidates that have advanced to November's general election have supported some form of QAnon conspiracy? And do not get me started on Georgia primary winner Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yes, I was in fact going to mention that information.
It needs more than a mention, my friend. Greene has not only supported the conspiracies of QAnon, but also said that Muslim women in Congress amount to an Islamic invasion of our government. While many Republicans have disavowed her, the president praised her win, and in an analysis by Media Matters, he shared items from QAnon at least 201 times. That's how big this fringe group has grown, and only now are we in the media fully standing up and taking notice. It took the FBI labeling them a potential domestic terror threat, and their members having been charged with murder, domestic terror, and a planned kidnapping. It's taken them reaching the top parts of our federal government. This all should have been addressed forever ago, but
let's not be hyperbolic.
Let's not be dismissive. I know we don't have time, but this group is structured like a cult, indoctrinated by a concern for others and a sense of duty, isolated by a confirmation bias, and with an apocalyptic belief in the ever-approaching Great Awakening. Their prophet is the anonymous Q, and their savior is the president. The fact that they have this much influence, frankly, is terrifying, especially when easily disprovable documentaries like Plandemic are viewed by millions within mere days. But perhaps you're correct, and shining a light on these groups will only draw more into their fold. I honestly don't know.
It's not that, Bruce. It's about integrity. As newsmen, we only tell the realities, without tilting the scale toward any one viewpoint. It's why one of this show's 13 marketing catchphrases is that we report just the facts.
But we don't. Why else does this take place in the golden age of radio? Why the silly local news? We've definitely lost objectivity by having any advertisements.
They're a necessary evil to keep the light on. Anyway, it's not like we have any real sponsors.
Whoa, hey there, Jonathan. I'm working on it.
Of course you are. Could we please end this unnecessary diversion?
No, I don't believe we can. Not until we find a way to address these instances with the weight they deserve. We need to show not all stories are created equal. When lies become commonplace and are spread like a virus, when people are denying scientific evidence that could save lives, when conspiracies overcome the real stories that people have to live with, we cannot remain objective when the truth has become subjective. We must report the facts, even when they have become politicized, or yesterday's unspoken news will become the tragic stories of today.
You clearly had that prepared.
I'm hearing the sounds of a news segment coming on.
Please, no. We have more than enough segments.
It'll be fine, Jonathan. We'll have someone else cover this one.
Like who? Bruce? He barely ever gets his writing completed on time.
Forgive me, Jonathan. I have sciatica.
How does that even...
What about that strange kid who always stops by the newsroom?
The one who always comes laden with binders of conspiracy theories he wants us to cover?
One and the same. What's his name?
Archie!
Hello!
Have you been here the entire time?
Yes, sir. Big fan, by the way, Mr. McNally. Big fan.
Thank you, but how are we going to have a conspiracy theorist covering conspiracy theories?
I have been reformed, actually. I've come through to the enlightened other side. But I've still got a pulse on the forums. I can give you the inside scoop on all the things 8-Coon has to say.
I don't know what most of that means.
I love it!
No, you don't.
I can see it now. Conspiracy Corner with Archie, the debunker.
Very clever, Denberg.
I don't understand that reference.
It's after your time.
Well, everyone, I am really excited to be part of the team.
That makes one of us.
Frankly, I'm indifferent.
This was your idea.
So it was. I somewhat lost interest after my impassioned speech.
Bruce,
It is what it is, Jonathan.
that's my line.
And so it is.
Well, that's quite more than all the time we have this week. And we'll have to see how none of this works out as we are taking a 1-week hiatus for Labor Day. We will return the following Monday to once again give you mostly just the facts. Good night.
This program was written and performed by Roger J. Thatcher and Dennis Schanneberg. You are encouraged to obtain a subscription to this broadcast with the simple selection of a button below. Furthermore, you can indicate your appreciation by giving us the old thumbs up. Be sure to tune in next week to hear tomorrow's news of yesterday, then.